So thank you everyone for joining us today. Today we're going to be having another Sustainachella workshop, and we're going to be talking about hurricane preparedness. While on Zoom, please remember that all participants are going to be muted and the videos are going to be disabled, and this is to prevent any sort of Zoom bombing from happening. But if you would like to ask a question, we highly encourage you to include it in the Q&A box. We'll get to it throughout the presentation. And if you would like to share any comments with the whole group, please make sure that you have the everyone or the all panelists and attendees option selected so that we can all take a look at the message. So today on our presentation, we're going to be having Robert Moyeda. Oh, so sorry, some of the titles are incorrect, but Robert Moyeda, he works with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and he can tell you a little bit more about his position. We have Matthew Roach, who works with the Department of Emergency Management, and we also have Madison Brown, who works with marketing and communications. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to Robert to start us off.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so you can see my title, and then we can just jump into the presentation. All right. So my name is Robert Moyeda, and I'm the Warning Coordination Meteorologist with the National Weather Service Miami Forecast Office. So, we're the forecast office of the National Weather Service that serves South Florida. So, we have 122 local forecast offices all across the country. So here in Miami, I represent the one that does all the forecasts and warnings for the city of Miami Beach and for all of Southern Florida. We also have here in the building where we're over by the FIU campus. Our building also houses the National Hurricane Center. They're also part of the National Weather Service, and of course, they're a more specialized center that does, of course, they monitor the tropics and produce hurricane forecasts for not just Florida, but really the entire Atlantic Ocean. So we coordinate very closely with the National Hurricane Center when there are any tropical or hurricane threats to our area. We also coordinate and work very closely with the city of Miami Beach, especially with the emergency management folks. We work very closely with them year round. And of course, especially when there are, big, any potential high impact weather events, we provide briefings, we participate in conference calls. So really, and also we do this not just for weather events, we also provide weather support for big events going on in the city. Of course, Miami Beach, there's a lot of stuff going on year round, especially during those peak times of the year when there's a lot of events going on. We provide weather support. So I just wanted to give just a general introduction as far as who we are and how we serve the city of Miami Beach. So all right, so let's talk about hurricanes. We're certainly right now we're in the peak of hurricane season. So historically, this is when conditions are most conducive for storms to form out there, and right now is no exception. We have a hurricane that's currently way out in the North Atlantic, moving away from North America, and then we have another system that's just off the coast of Africa that looks to be at least highly likely to be our next tropical system over the next few days. Still out there, way out there over the Eastern Atlantic. And then we have another system that might be developing closer to the U.S. coast, but really more so close, like off the coast of like the Carolinas. So it's not going to really be a threat to Florida. So the bottom line is, at least for South Florida, we don't have any threats from tropical systems at this time. But it's been a pretty active season so far, and that's what this graphic here illustrates. So far, we're already just slightly above the average number of storms for an entire season. So we still have several weeks to go, but we're already at 15 named storms, and we could end up with 2 more here over the next several days. We've had 6 hurricanes so far. The average for an entire season is 7, so we're getting close to that average number and probably exceed it. And then we've had 3 major hurricanes, which is right at the average for the entire season. Now, for the most part, based on these tracks you see here on this map, so these are the tracks of all the storms we've had so far this season. You can see where most of them have been way out over the Atlantic. In other words, we've had very few that have actually formed or made it as far west as Florida. But we did have Hurricane Idalia back in August that did form over the Caribbean, then moved over the Eastern Gulf and affected North Florida. So there are always exceptions, and we still have quite a ways to go when it comes to hurricane season. So we're kind of like we're running about 45% above normal when it comes to like storm activity as compared to the average for this time of year. And this is something that we showed when we updated our seasonal outlook back in early August. We started out the season kind of thinking it was going to be closer to maybe like an average number of storms. But when we updated the forecast in early August, we're already seeing signs that that looked like we're leaning towards having an above normal season. And sure enough, that's what's materialized so far. And well, it looks like we are going to end up with an above normal number of storms. So we have some competing factors that made that initial outlook difficult to pin down as far as where we would end up. We have the El Nino global weather pattern, which is developing and is already in place, and that tends to limit the number of storms that can form in the Atlantic Ocean. But then on the other hand, we have some factors that are pointed towards a more active season, like very warm ocean waters and plentiful moisture in the tropical Atlantic. So it looks like, for the most part, the warm waters have kind of won out, along with some other factors. So that's what's led to what we feel has led to this more active than normal season so far. Okay, so here are the names for the season. We've already gone through the first two columns. So we were all the way through Nigel, which is the current system that's out there in the North Atlantic. So we're already we'll be starting to go into the third or last column. Hopefully we won't go too far down that column, but the next name on the list is Ophelia. So the next tropical storm that forms, that's the name that it would be given. So this graph shows, again, and keep in mind, this is for the entire Atlantic Ocean, not for a specific part of the area, like Florida, for example. So this is kind of area wide, showing that the peak of the season, again, when you count all the number of storms that have formed over the last, many decades, the peak of the season is sometime during the first half of September. So that's kind of what those sharp, upward lines are there in the graph. But if we kind of look at it from a wider perspective, really it's the time frame from August through all the way through the end of October. So August, September, and October, those 3 months really encapsulate the peak of the hurricane season. That's the 3 months when South Florida's been hit. Almost every hurricane that's hit South Florida, I think, except for maybe one or two. We're going back over like 100 plus years here. Almost every hurricane that's hit us has been during those 3 months. So, we're in the last 10 days of September, but we still have the whole month of October to go when it comes to that peak part of the season. So we still got time, so we're still going to have to, continue to watch things pretty closely. And actually, of all the hurricanes that have hit South Florida, more hurricanes have hit South Florida in the month of October than in any other calendar month. So that's the very noteworthy stat to keep in mind. So all in all, this is kind of like our hurricane history here. This is not a forecast, of course, but this is showing you over the last 150 plus years, the tracks of all the hurricanes that have passed within 50 miles of Miami. In other words, the center of the storm passing within 50 miles of Miami. So, some of these were hurricanes that went directly over, the Miami area. Some of them maybe were just to the east or just to the north or just to the south. But basically, all of these represented some impact, whether a major direct impact or maybe a very, very close call. So, it just shows that we're in a highly hurricane-prone area, at least, from a historical perspective. And that's something that we always, use as our primary motivator for encouraging people to be ready. Really, our hurricane history alone shows us that. One of the things, that we always look very closely at, and it can be something that's, certainly can be a major concern, if you will, but, something that at the same time, we've, I think, done a a pretty good job recently of getting a handle of is storms that develop and intensify very quickly before making landfall. And we've seen several examples of that over the years. And in fact, this map shows all of these are these. This map shows the tracks and the landfalls of the 9 strongest hurricanes that make landfall in the United States. So all 9 of these storms you see listed here were either Category 4 or 5 at landfall in the U.S. So 5 of those 9 made landfall in Florida. And then all 9 of those were tropical storms 3 days before landfall. So in other words, they went through a very rapid intensification phase shortly before making landfall as a Category 4 or 5. And this is something that can happen, especially around Florida, where we have very warm waters, and often the conditions are conducive for not just for storms to form and to get strong, but for storms to intensify very rapidly. Think of Hurricane Andrew in 1992. If you were around during that time, you remember Hurricane Andrew went from a tropical storm, barely a tropical storm, to a Category 5 in just 3 days. And this is something that we've seen with other storms in the past. So the forecasts are improving, especially when it comes to identifying those situations when storms can intensify rapidly. But it's something that we need to keep very close eye on. And we need to keep that in mind when there's storms out there, and we're forecasting this potential rapid intensification, take that seriously, because, we're very attuned to that these days. And knowing that our history alone, again, shows us that Florida has been affected several times by these very rapidly intensifying systems. So, tropical storms and hurricanes are multi-hazard events. So it's not just about the wind. We often think about the wind, and for good reason, but we also have to consider the flooding aspect, which actually is the most dangerous part of the storm. So, we're familiar with the categories. I think most of us, we hear it all the time when we refer to hurricanes. It's a Category 1 or a Category 2, et cetera. So, these are the categories that make up the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale. And that's an important thing to point to remember, is that this is a wind scale only. It's not really pertaining directly to what category of impacts it is for the other aspects of the storm, the other hazards like flooding, for example. It's only pertaining to the wind. So when you get to Category 3 and higher, those are what we call major hurricanes. So major hurricanes, by definition, are hurricanes that are Category 3 or higher. But any of these hurricanes, any from a Category 1 even down to a Category 1, these are storms that are dangerous, that have produced winds that are strong enough to be dangerous and hazardous to people and to property. So it's not just that we ignore the ones and we only pay attention to the 3s, 4s, and 5s. We certainly have to prepare and pay attention to all of these. Statistically speaking, though, water is really the major killer when it comes to hurricanes in the United States, and really not just hurricanes, but any tropical system. Storm surge, for example, which is that rapid rise in water that accompanies landfalling hurricanes, storm surge alone accounts for almost half of all the deaths in the United States from tropical storms and hurricanes, with rainfall flooding accounting for another 27%. So it's not that we want to ignore the wind. I mean, certainly the wind is dangerous and does lead to fatalities, unfortunately, but the water by far is the deadliest part of the storm from a statistical standpoint. So, being in a coastal location, right? Miami Beach is right on the, is a barrier island. We have to be very mindful of that and take that storm surge threat seriously. So, again, I quickly mentioned what storm surge is. It's a rise in the water that's generated by the storm. As a storm approaches and makes landfall, the wind pushing against the water surface leads to those water levels increasing, and of course, the stronger the wind, the more that water level is going to be pushed up. Also, storms that move perpendicular to land, or that make landfall at a direct, at a perpendicular angle. Let's say, for example, from due east, moving directly onshore from east to west along Miami Beach, that those are the ones that have the potential to produce higher storm surge than storms that are maybe tracking parallel or maybe moving like from south to north along the coastline, for example. So those, the intensity of the storm, the movement of the storm affects the amount of storm surge. So we model and we forecast storm surge based on the individual characteristics of that storm that's going on at that time. And the reason why we really concern ourselves and emphasize storm surge so much is that we saw, for example, just looking back last year, just a little bit over a year ago, just under a year ago, Hurricane Ian, which made landfall in Southwest Florida, of the 141 fatalities, which 66 of those were direct, most of those were from storm surge, directly related to the storm surge moving onshore. And of course, the storm surge in the area near landfall in the Fort Myers Beach, Naples areas, that storm surge was 10 feet or higher, even as high as 15 feet in some areas. So, and especially the impacts from a fatality standpoint were largely to people ages 60 and up. And that's what that graph is showing, the age distribution of the deaths from Hurricane Ian. So unfortunately, just like with many weather hazards, hurricanes and storm surge tends to affect more significantly our more vulnerable populations. So that's why, again, it's so important that we are, that we understand the threats, but most of all, that we take the appropriate actions when a hurricane threatens, and especially a situation where we have a potential storm surge. So when we communicate storm surge, we normally tell you, or we normally mention how high the storm surge might be. So for example, when we say something like 3 to 5 feet of storm surge, we're talking about 3 to 5 feet of flooding above ground level. So think about your location, think about the ground, right? In your location, 3 to 5 feet is literally 3 to 5 feet potential of that above ground at your location. It's not, we do all the conversion. In other words, people will sometimes refer to mean sea level or some other type of reference level, but we convert all that information to above ground level to make it more relatable and to be more, actionable when it comes to, decisions that are made regarding, evacuations, for example. So, we have a pole right outside our building here that it's color coded based on storm surge flooding levels that we show in our graphics. So the colors in our graphics that represent different storm surge flooding ranges match up to the colors on this pole to give you a visual perspective. So when we say 3 to 5 feet, that's me standing next to that pole there in that picture. 3 to 5 feet is in that yellow area. So it's pretty high up. An average person, that's going to be close to the top of, close to the top of our heads. So that's very dangerous, and that's life-threatening flooding. It doesn't have to be really dramatically high numbers. 3 to 5 feet is more than enough to be potentially life-threatening if, again, the proper precautions are taken. So, I'm sure, Matthew's probably going to talk about this more, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but it's important that we know our evacuation zone. Yes, all of Miami Beach, as of course, being in the Barrier Island, is in one of these storm surge planning zones, and it's most of the beach is in Zone B, which is not the highest, but it's the next highest. So, again, know your zone, and when those evacuation orders are issued by the county is already using our forecasts, and they're in close contact with us when it comes to making those decisions as far as which areas are the ones that are more vulnerable for that particular storm. So again, of course, in Miami Beach, you live in an evacuation zone, so that should be top, the top of the list as far as in your hurricane plan, what you need to do. So, there's a lot of information that's available on, when there's hurricanes out there. You go to to our website, for example. Let's say you go to the Hurricane Center website, hurricanes.gov. There's a lot of information out there. So it's important to understand how to use that information to help you be informed and to help you make right decisions. And, when we do a forecast, even though we're forecasting an individual track, there's actually a, a high number. There's a high number of potential tracks, so potential scenarios that could occur. So we evaluate all of that. So we just don't focus on one track and that's exactly what's going to happen. No, we know that small changes in the atmosphere can lead to variations or shifts in the track and intensity of a storm. So we consider a range or a multiple scenarios that can occur. So when you see, for example, the forecast cone is a little bit of a reflection of that. The cone is telling you, okay, the storm is more likely to be somewhere in the middle of the cone, but it could also be on the edges of the cone. That's those are very realistic possibilities. And if it goes on the edge of the cone, then the impacts from that storm are going to spread far away from the cone. In fact, that's always the scenarios. That's always the case. Tropical storm and hurricane impacts always extend well outside the cone because the cone's only looking at the center of the storm. The cone does not refer to how big the storm is or how wide of an area that storm covers. So very important that we recognize that. So again, the cone conveys the most likely track of the center of the storm, again, incorporating at least some of those range of possible scenarios that I showed in that previous graphic. But it does not show the area that's expected to be impacted. The impact area is always going to be spreading out away to some extent from the edges of that. So at the end of the day, really, it's about understanding what our potential hazards are in our community. So when we convey that information, we're looking at things, for example, like wind speed probabilities. So these wind speed probabilities are based on all those range of possible scenarios. So we calculate all those different scenarios and how many of those scenarios actually end up producing, for example, tropical storm force winds or hurricane force winds in our area. So wind speed probabilities are one way of us conveying what the potential is for at least that type of wind occurring at your location. So when we say, for example, there's a 40% chance of hurricane conditions in Miami Beach, that means literally there's a 4 in 10 or 40% chance based on all those potential scenarios that can occur. So it's not just looking at the cone, it's not just looking at that exact forecast track, it's considering a range of possible scenarios, and it takes into account the size of the storm as well, which the cone does not. We also use that same methodology to inform about the potential arrival of the tropical storm force winds. So we use an earliest reasonable time, which is a more conservative early estimate. And then we have a most likely time, which is based more closely to the official forecast. So we give a range of times to give you an idea, okay, this is the time frame in which we need to be ready, because once tropical storm force winds arrive, it's too late already to be doing any kind of outside preparation. So we want to make sure that, especially for the earliest reasonable time, that's the time when large scale activities are typically cease, to give ourselves a window of time to be ready in case the storm speeds up or moves faster than forecast. So we convert all that information then into threat and impact graphics that convey in a graphical sense what the potential risk is, based again on all the potential scenarios leaning towards a reasonable worst case scenario. We don't want to give you the reasonable best case scenario, because although that may happen quite a bit, we don't want to leave people underprepared. We want to provide at least a potential of what could happen. We don't want to go with an absolute worst case, but we want to show at least what we consider to be a plausible or a reasonable worst case. In other words, if the storm ends up tracking closer to us in forecasts, and that happens quite a bit. That's why we have all those scenarios that we looked at earlier. All those are possible. So that's why we have to convey that information. So again, the colors here on this graphic give you an idea. Okay, this is what I need to prepare for, just in case that storm does come closer to me than what that forecast may show. So again, this provides a whole picture of the potential hazards for each of the main hazards of the storm from a wind, storm surge, rainfall, and tornado perspective. but it also ensures that we're well protected, well protected for really pretty much any scenario that might occur. So again, it's just kind of different examples of some graphics that we produce for the different hazards and the different potential threat levels for each hazard. So again, this forces us to look beyond the cone. Okay, the cone is not a factor in these graphics. This is taking into account the size of the storm and the different potential tracks that that storm could take. So when we issue watches and warnings, for example, those hurricane watches, hurricane warnings, storm surge watches and warnings, that's taking into account those range of possible scenarios. So it doesn't mean if you're, for example, if we issue a hurricane warning, it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to get hurricane force winds in your area, but it means that hurricane force winds are expected somewhere within the designated warning area. And that warning area could extend, for 3 or 4 counties. So, and we try to narrow it down as much as possible, but we have to allow a safety margin, again, accounting for any shifts in the track of the storm. So, but hurricane warning, for example, means you need to be ready for hurricane conditions. And, the probabilities are high enough that we think that it's at least a decent, if not a likely probability of you getting hurricane force winds. So it's really important that we pay attention and heed these watches and warnings. These are key indicators as far as what our risk is and what actions we need to take that are commensurate to that risk. So just to wrap up here, it's really important, obviously, that we get hurricane information from official sources, from the city, from the National Weather Service, and from local media. We work together, we work in concert, we're collaborating, we're communicating behind the scenes in many cases to make sure that everyone's getting the information at the time that it's needed for proper precautions to be taken and for good decisions to be made. We update forecasts every 6 hours, so we want to make sure that we do not fall into a trap of, I guess, what we call an anchoring, where we just look at one forecast and say, okay, that I kind of like that forecast. It's not going to hit us, so I think I'm going to be safe. Well, that might be true in one, maybe at that time, but there are times that the forecast scenario can change. The track can shift, or the forecast can shift, can maybe lead to a greater threat for us, or maybe it could be the other way around, where it initially shows a higher threat and then that threat backs off as we get closer. So make your preparations, heeding those watches and warnings, but at the same time, keep track of the forecasts. Don't fall into that anchoring bias. That's why the forecasts are updated 24 hours a day, because we know that things can and do change. So, we're in the peak of the season, so this is the time to certainly be ready. Whatever maybe part of your plan needs to be revised, this is a good time to do it. But for the most part, we're at the peak of the season, so we definitely need to be ready. So, our website is weather.gov/Miami. That's where you get all your local weather information any day of the year. And of course, when there's a hurricane threat for our area, we're going to be putting a lot of these same graphics that we just showed. Those graphics are going to be posted on our website, and all that same information is communicated via briefings to the city and also to the county and to all of our media partners as well. All right, so if there's time, I'll be more than happy to take any questions. Thank you.
So Robert, we'll save questions till the end of the presentation.
Okay, sounds good.
Yes. So now we'll be handing it off to Matthew, who will be presenting.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Matthew.
Okay. Like Robert said, a lot of it is about, we can't control what the weather does, but we can be prepared. And again, we'll talk about some of the things in the history, is like Robert was talking about. We've seen storms that had a track and all of a sudden took a right turn and affected other areas. So the biggest thing we can do is be prepared. And in that, we sit there and says, make a plan, build a kit, and stay informed. This is very important, especially as we come into peak season here of this. And this is why we have Preparedness Month. To change my slides. Can you click the slide for me? There you go. Biggest thing is to have a plan. We sit there and says, that know your, like Robert was talking about with your surge zones, that again, Miami Beach is AB zone. And usually when the county calls for an evacuation, it's not usually just A only, it'll be AB. So Miami Beach is in effect for all of that. One of the things that we found out and what Robert was talking about was our most vulnerable population. This is why the county has the Emergency Evacuation Assistance Program, EAP, and that information is available in the hurricane guides. And again, that they register for that. So we know that, hey, we have somebody that's in a situation where they need assistance to evacuate and what kind of assistance that they'll need. And they need to be registered that before the hurricane hits. When we got into a couple years with here, they sit there and everybody crashed the system, a day or two before the hurricane was to come in. So this is why we says, make sure if you have residents in your building, if you're in a condo or people in your household, that they register for the Emergency Evacuation Assistance Program. The other thing is, have a place to go. Friends and relatives, by ready.gov sits there and says that you need to evacuate 20 to 50 miles away from the storm path. You've heard, and again, the governor speaking on this last one, go 10 miles, not 100 miles. This is what we're talking with surge zones. But if you're in the evacuation zone, make sure you leave that evacuation zone, because they took that with the best information that we have to establish those evacuation zones. People that chose not to evacuate during our last storm, and they found out that, again, 15 foot of surge, they weren't in the direct path of the storm, but 15 surge was well beyond the direct track of the path of the storm. So don't pay attention to that anchor, as Robert was talking about. But again, 20 to 50 miles away from the storm path. Also, if you're planning to evacuate to a hotel and take your pets with you, make sure it is a pet-friendly hotel. Just because the storm's coming in does not change private businesses' practices if they're pet-friendly or not. So if you're evacuating with your pet, please make sure that you check if it's a pet-friendly. The other thing we talk about is, we do the county opens evacuation shelters. We have none on Miami Beach. But again, we like to say that is a lifeboat, not a cruise liner. So if you have another place to go and to stay, we suggest that you do that. And, be ready to stay. And it might be several days after the storm before you're able to return. And we've seen this in many storms where, again, the city won't be open up 3 to 5 days after the initial attack of the storm, depending on how much impact we had with the storm. And then we sit there and, all the other things that we talked about, and having your plan. And then make sure you practice and test your plans. Like having a communications plan. We have my sister in Missouri, that's our out-of-state contact. And so everybody from out of state that wants to find out how our family is doing, they call her. I call her and let her know, and then she can update that. That way it keeps the local lines more freed up for emergency information, and also make sure that everybody stays informed. And remember, text is best. If the hurricane plan, if you don't have one already established, are you ready for Miami-Dade? And also we have places on our website that will be able to help you make that plan. Go ahead, and if you can give me my next slide. The next thing we say, build a kit. Those kits, again, I start with most things that I need to survive, first of all, would be water. And water, we say that's a gallon of water per person for at least 3 days. And we use the term at least because, as I said, sometimes you can be farther out than that. So 3 to 5 days, but we'll use 3 as at least for 3. If you are filling jugs of water, you want to change those out every 6 months. So if you filled them last season, you want to empty them out, wash them out, and refill them before the next storm comes in. Like my wife and I, 2 people, Chihuahua, 3 days, how much is that per day? And then you times that and then figure out what bottle size of water you're having. So it'd be like 60 bottles of water a day that we would need for that. And that's not only because of hot Florida, and again, with power out, you're not going to have AC. And this is why we says it's better to evacuate than be sitting on hot, no air conditioned and drinking bottled water. The other thing is we say to have at least 3 days of non-perishable food. Try to pick things that you want to eat during this and keeping your nutrition up, because there's going to be a lot of enough stressors as it is. So we want you to be able to make sure that you have non-stressors and food that is something that you can fix with very little water or heat. So we want things that you can do very quickly. The other thing, besides all the other things that we teach about, is remember your medication. Not only your medications, but also your pet's medications and things for your pets. So remember that your eyeglasses, I mean, it's simple things to forget that's going to make you more comfortable during a disaster. So please make sure that you have the kit. The biggest thing is, and I'm going to let our marketing communications talk about this, is stay informed. Like Robert was telling you, yes, there are weather sites, but again, you need to pay attention to local warnings. Miami-Dade has a app, is ready, Miami-Dade, and also Miami Beach. We have MB Alert here on Miami Beach, and I'll turn it over to Madison for that.
Hi, I'm Madison. Good morning, everyone. So, as Matthew mentioned, there are a lot of ways to stay informed, and that's one of the most important things that you can do in the event of a storm or any other emergency situation. So it's very important to follow along for the next couple steps throughout hurricane season and just for the rest of the year. So one of the easiest things you can do to get information from the city is sign up for our newsletters. We send a detailed biweekly newsletter every other Friday to around 30,000 residents, in addition to dedicated emails regarding emergency management and traffic impacts for major events. You can sign up for that newsletter or specific newsletters based on certain topics or based on where you live. You just have to go to miamibeachfl.gov/subscriptions. And you can see here's an example during a king tide period of an email that we sent. It just has the information on the dates of those king tide events and some tips on how to stay safe and dry and report flooding if you see it. And then here's another example of hurricane season. This was something that we sent during Hurricane Ian, which fortunately did not affect our area too badly. However, we had all hands on deck and we had all of the information regarding rescheduled events, closed facilities, the forecasted cone, and just any other relevant information that you might need to prepare for a storm like that. We also offer crisis communications via text message. So 24/7 real time, we are reacting to public safety, transportation impacts, crisis communications, any event like that. And we also utilize Facebook alerts during major road closures, emergency issues, and text messages are sent to our subscribers when warranted. So if you want to sign up, it's actually really easy. You can do it right now. It takes about 2 seconds. You just have to text MB Alert, all one word, to 888-777. That's 888-777. So if you want to pull out your phone, you can just text that right now. And that's all one word on the screen there, MB Alert. And you'll be signed up to receive text messages. And here's an example below of some of the text messages that we've sent during flooding issues, like how to report flooding events. And we also send this whenever there's road closures, if there's an accident or something like that, and you need to take a different route, we'll send those texts there as well. Speaking of that flooding information, you definitely want to report flooding if you see it. So if you notice flooding on your drive home or in your neighborhood, you can report that to our 24/7 control room by calling 305-673-7625. Again, that's 305-673-7625. Or you can send photos via email to flooding@miamibeachfl.gov. And that goes to our 24/7 control room. So Public Works will send a vehicle out there to take care of the flooding event. And then finally, just stay connected by following the City of Miami Beach on social media. So all of those things that I mentioned before, the text message, the emails, anything like that, if it's important enough for us to send it via text or email, we will also likely be posting it on our social media accounts as well. So you can share it there. You can get the latest information in real time by following our accounts. We have our Facebook, which is facebook.com/City of Miami Beach. Our Twitter and our X account and Instagram account are at Miami Beach News. And then we have LinkedIn, which is the City of Miami Beach, and Nextdoor, which is the City of Miami Beach. So you can follow us, and all of that content will get posted across those channels as necessary. Other ways to engage: in the event of a major storm, we do create a dedicated webpage that will continuously update with links to those emails that I showed earlier. And if there's anything like hotel information, evacuation information, anything that's relevant, if there's event closures, city facilities, anything like that will be constantly updated on that dedicated webpage. And there will be a banner at the top of our homepage, so you don't even have to look really far to get that information in the event of a major storm. So here's an example down here. It says, please click here for hurricane preparedness information. If we were to experience a storm that is threatening our area, that banner will say something like, please click here for the latest updates on Hurricane Ian, for example. And when you click that, you'll be able to see all of the latest updates, updated around the clock as updates come in. And for other ways to engage with the city, you can find pretty much everything that I mentioned if you just go to miamibeachfl.gov/engagement toolbox. And there will be a link to sign up for email notifications, text message notifications. You can find our social media channels, and you can also see MBTV if you want to watch meetings live, or a link to the latest issue of MB Magazine. So all of that is really handy right there by going to miamibeachfl.gov/engagement toolbox. Thank you guys so much.
Thing that we of course we're in a hurricane season, so we talk about hurricanes, but there's other things that affects us. I mean, we had a no-name rainstorm that flooded different areas around us, that affected our fuel, affected transportation, and all sorts of things. So we sit there and says, don't just prepare for the worst type scenario. Having the hurricane bins and a hurricane kit to where you can grab and leave your home or be able to stay in your home depending on the type of event. But we also sat there and saw where people were trapped at work. And so we sat there and said, at least have a preparedness kit at your, or what we call go bag, at your work, and then in your vehicle. So if you get stuck on Venetian or one of the causeways for a couple of hours, that you'd have at least water and some things of comfort in there. So always think about things that you can use and make you more comfortable in a situation, that and be prepared, as we're saying in this thing, is always be prepared for what we can do in this. Go ahead and give me the next slide. One of the other things that you can do is we have Miami Beach CERT, the Community Emergency Response Team training. And with this, we train citizens, again, how to stay safe, and again, how to do fire extinguishers and preparedness for disaster medical, and how we can assist ourselves and others that live in our community. And that's what this is all about. We do this where you can do the hybrid course, where you do 8 hours online, and then you just come from 16 hours with a weekend, or 2 weekdays. We have different programs, and then we also have it in English and Spanish courses to help prepare our citizens to make us a more resilient community. So it would be CERT at miamibeachfl.gov, but always remember to stay informed and with your local and county and state, and we coordinate that through here at the Emergency Operations Center. So I'll be more than happy to email me, but if you email interested in the CERT program, directly to CERT at miamibeachfl.gov, and we can help you set up a course if you're interested in that. This is Preparedness Month, and we, as I said, we appreciate everybody coming on and doing this. I'm going to turn it over to Redondo.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you to all our lovely presenters. Y'all did such an amazing job. Thank you, Robert and Maddie. Um, Before letting everyone off, I would be remiss if I didn't mention our community rating systems. This is a program that the city participates in, and we also participate in the program for public information where we get points. And as we accrue these points through many different activities that we would do, regarding like our communication efforts to educate the public about the importance of flood insurance, we get a certain rating, and as of April 2022, we classified under the Class 5 CRS rating, which provides the community with with a 25% discount on flood insurance. So flood insurance is very important here in Miami Beach. The majority of properties sit on a floodplain zone. So this, again, just really goes to show how seriously we take it and how much of an effort the city puts into communicating flood, the importance of flood. So these are just a few of the activities and outreach methods that we use to make sure that we're getting the information out. We share maps with information services. We have all hazard guides. We work with real estate agents to make sure that they're disclosing that the properties that they are listing are on a floodplain zone. We have brochures, multiple flyers, and documents on our website. Like Maddie mentioned, we also send communications out through our newsletters. You can see over on the top right corner, this newsletter coming from the mayor. And then we also will put things out over here, as you can see, Get Resiliency Upgraded. This is from our MB magazine. So we are really trying to make an effort to communicate the importance of flood insurance. And before, again, I let y'all go, I just wanted to give an opportunity to win some fun prizes by participating in our poll. So I'm going to put our poll up now, and if everyone can please participate. We have just a few questions. The first question being, in the event of a hurricane, is forecast to, in the event a hurricane is forecast to impact our area, how far inland should you evacuate? The next question is it important to teach family members how to turn off gas and electric service in your home before evacuating during a hurricane? If you are filling containers with drinking water to store in your disaster kit, how often should you replace it? You should have supply of non-perishable food for at least blank in your disaster kit. So how many days? You should have blank day supply of drinking water per person in your disaster kit. How many gallons of water do you need for each person each day? And the last question is, in the event of an evacuation, you can take your pet to any hotel or motel with you because you have to accept pets during an emergency. So just going to give everyone a few minutes to participate in this poll. And while we have the poll going, I wanted to share a few of our upcoming events where you will be able to stop by and claim a prize. So the first event actually you won't be able to stop by at to claim one of our prizes, but we have a sustainability committee meeting coming up on Thursday, September 28th from 1 to 3 p.m. actually, and it's going to be over Zoom. We also have our North Beach compost pickup and workshop. This month, they're going to be focusing on civic science and microscopy. And that's going to be on Saturday, September 30th from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. You can get more details about this event by visiting mbrisingabove.com/events. And we'll have the specific hours for when they're going to be doing the microscopy in those details. And then another really big event that we're going to be having coming soon on October 20th is our Yappy Hour. This event's going to be from 5 to 7, and it's going to be an event to educate the public about the importance of being responsible pet owners and how being a responsible pet owner positively impacts Biscayne Bay. We're also going to be having a few opportunities for residents to engage with the department. We're going to be doing a few vulnerability assessments and we're going to be having some tabling pop-ups at different sites. In North Beach, the site is going to be at the North Shore Open Space Park on Friday, October 13th from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And this is going to be an opportunity for y'all to engage with us and let us know more about your experience, living with flooding. And then for South Beach, your opportunity is going to be on October 19th at the Miami Beach Botanical Garden. And that's again going to be from 6 to 9 p.m. And then for Mid Beach, your opportunity is Sunday, November 5th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Scott Rakow. Alrighty, everyone. Thank you so much for participating in our poll today. And thank you so much for participating in our presentation. We hope that you have a great day, and we'll see you at the next Sustainachella. Bye, everyone.